Hey, welcome to Perspectives. I'm joined today with Dan Irvin, who leads our Strip District campus. Welcome.
How's it going?
It's going well. Yeah. And today we are going to talk about dating in your 20s, 30s, basically young adult dating. I guess you'd call that young adult. And this hopefully will be helpful if you are somebody who is in your 20s, 30s. Hopefully helpful as well if you are older than that and you have kids or friends who are also dating. If you're already kind of past the dating stage, chances are you do have friends who still are dating. And so even if it isn't directly applied to you, hopefully some of the things that we talk about today could be somewhat helpful as well. So Dan, give us wisdom.
Yeah,
dating in your 20s and 30s.
Wow.
Talk to us.
Met my wife in high school and got married shortly after college. So the dating scene.
So you didn't date much in your 20s?
Didn't do a lot of dating, but I am.
Are you saying you didn't date your wife? Even at that point?
That's a good question. I think in college we were, ask out on a date. We might have been past that a little bit. We certainly set aside time to date each other and have a date night, date days, activities we like to do together. But yeah, I think never had experience with the dating apps, the things that are prevalent now as far as I'm in my 20s and I'm looking to meet somebody. Didn't have a ton of experience there, but am around quite a number of young adults now at the Strip District who are in the middle of this, and I think COVID changed things and coming out of that. I'm counseling a lot, talking to a lot of people that are kind of right in the middle of this world and trying to navigate it.
Okay. So your wisdom is what?
I think the patience is what I say to a lot of people.
Okay.
I think there's a pressure sometimes, especially in the Christian circles, to meet somebody, know it's the person you want to marry, move forward with that quickly. And what I tell people all the time is, if it's the person God will have for you to marry, it'll be clear at some point. You'll get to a place where you're comfortable with each other. You've sought counsel, you've sought wisdom from other places, and to just be patient with it. But 22 is different than 28. Very different in some cases, and I've seen a lot of different. And also on the other side, I've seen some 22-year-olds that are more ready for marriage than some 28, 29, 30-year-olds in some cases. So,
yeah, it seems you can certainly make a mistake that costs you for a long time. And so that's part of why you date, is to see somebody when pressure's on day to day, so that you're not in just the phase of a relationship where you're saying, oh, this is great, they're great, where you actually get to see each other when it's hard, when you're not at your best. So that is part of that, and that's probably why patience is good. So let's just ask a couple just simple questions. Dating apps, yes, no?
Yeah, I think there is some good things about dating apps. And again, I'm not familiar with all of the different ones and which ones are good, which ones are bad, but I think I've talked to a number of people that have met their spouse and it seems like things are going well, the relationship is healthy, that say, we met on a dating app because we didn't want to go meet at a bar, we didn't want to go, we didn't know where else, we work from home, so we don't see a lot of people. So I think there are some probably pretty good ones out there. And I would say yes. I would say it can be a positive thing. I'd say the danger is to become, and I've talked to people that said, I got so almost addicted, like anything else on your phone, to does this person, follow me back, or is this person, and it just becomes, you're swiping, you're looking through all these apps, and time consuming. It becomes such a focus that it takes away from, your focus on a relationship with God, other things, and like anything else, it can suck you in and consume too much of you.
Yeah, would you say of the weddings you're performing, how many would you guess, percentage-wise, are people who met on a dating app?
High, more than half. I'd say more than half.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I would say.
3/4, maybe not, but definitely more than half.
Yeah, that would be my guess.
Yeah.
It makes sense to do a dating app because if you can pre-screen and say, here's other people that are open, To me, it makes a lot of sense to look at that. I think, like anything, there's probably a lot of nonsense that you have to wade through, and I think your word's a good word to say be aware of just how you can get consumed with it. But certainly it makes some sense to utilize that. What else could somebody do who says, I'm open to this, but it doesn't feel like it's happening right now, and that would be positive?
Yeah, I think, as far as, that maybe they're connected on dating apps, I've talked to someone recently who just said, I just took a break from the dating apps and wanted to clear my, be open to dating and be open to if God brings the right person in, but also not, it felt like he was pushing too hard, like it was too much of a thing. And I think being out there in spaces, in groups, connected, at a church that you feel like there's other like-minded believers is a place to be. If your workplace isn't, filled with other people your age or people that you would like to date, to figure out places socially where you can go where it's like, these are like-minded people that, I could see myself with.
Yeah, I would think it's important to be honest enough with yourself, because I think sometimes there can be a tendency to say, well, I'm not interested, or I don't need it. And it becomes almost self-protective.
Yeah.
And then you don't put yourself in a place where you can meet people or where you respond to people.
Yeah.
I heard Tim Keller, who's an old pastor, once say that what a lot of people do is they predetermine who they will or will not date based on attractiveness rather than character or friendship.
Yeah.
And the way he described it is, he said, if you say there's 100 eligible people in a group, people who are single, kind of, he said what most people do is they say, well, I have a type. And, right away they'll rule out, 80% of them just because it's, they don't meet my criteria. And then they'll rule out another 10 because they don't have the right job or aren't at the same stage of life, and then another 5 or 6 on, and they said all of a sudden the 100 people becomes 2, and you haven't even given somebody a chance to get to know them. And so I think if you're able to get to know people without the pressure of a lot of dating, obviously that's a really big positive, because sometimes you might be surprised, and I think this is true from people I know who've gotten married. Certainly there's an attractiveness that matters right at the beginning, but attractiveness grows out of character over time more than it does out of physical features. Now, again, I'm not saying that that's irrelevant, but what I'm saying is I think opening yourself up to somebody you may not be initially open to may not be a bad thing if you're in that place. And being honest enough just to say, okay, maybe I've been too restrictive in how I've been thinking about this.
Yeah, maybe that's another kind of flaw with the dating apps is it's so quick. You see a picture, maybe see a picture, and keep like, well, not attracted physically. You're doing less of the reading about, and it's, again, it's even hard to read, a description of someone and understand what their character's like, what they're going to be like, in a group setting with other people, and where they like to hang out, things like that. So that's a good point.
Yeah, and what they're kind of saying to themselves.
Yeah.
Another thing I heard somebody once say was, if you're dating, seek to be the person that the person you're looking for is looking for. And what they meant by that, I think, was, a lot of times we think, oh, I want this kind of a person, but then we don't act like that or live like that in our, and so we may not attract the kind of person to us that we actually want to attract because we're not living as that kind of a person. I thought that was an interesting idea. Maybe that can be overplayed, overthought out, but I thought that was an interesting idea. How would you respond to that?
No, I think there's a lot of validity in that. There's if the focus of your life, and at any age, 20s, 30s, or beyond, is I need to find my spouse, and not on what is God doing in me, how is God forming me, I think all the other stuff will take care of itself if your focus could be on who God is, what He says about you, not what does this other person think of me, or what am I putting myself out there? So yeah, I think there's so much, there can be so much pressure from parents, from all the other influences. I got to get married. I want to have kids. I want to start this, and it's not happening. Am I getting too old to date? All those. I talk to people all the time that are concerned about that. And in the scheme of life, in the scheme of what's going on, God might be up to something more than that if we would take the time, and I'm talking to myself too in a lot of areas, take the time to step back and say, okay, what is God trying to tell me? Is He, in my life?
Right. Well, obviously there's being okay being single, like coming to terms with saying, I don't need this person, which will ultimately help you if and when that time comes. And it's just a better emotional place to be than I need this right now. But like I said, I think being honest with yourself, I want it and it's a good desire, and therefore it's okay to pursue it or to put myself out there is also important in that. So in today's culture, as I best understand it, and I'm a little out of it as well, people do the whole we're talking before they actually date. So talk to us about talking versus dating. What's the distinction? Is that a good distinction, not a good distinction? How should somebody navigate that?
Right. From the way I understand it, it is very different, I think, depending on who the person is. And some person might, and that's the danger, and I think some people might say, oh, we're talking, and the other person might think, I didn't know we were talking. I just thought we were talking, having a conversation. And so I think there's we're an exclusive couple stage that you get to after, you're getting to know each other. Maybe this is more in a group setting, but I think once the ice is broken with, and sometimes it goes either way now, where someone says, I would like to take you out on a date. Can we get coffee? Can we grab lunch? I think then it becomes, we're talking. We're really serious about getting to know each other. And I do still see there's a line drawn with most people at some point. Either we're not going to pursue this farther, or we'd like to become exclusive, or boyfriend, girlfriend, however they want to call it. So I think it's blurry for some people, and I think the younger, even college age, there's a lot of talking. There's a lot of you can be talking to. I've seen
multiple people,
a number of
right.
different. Yeah, sure. You're talking. You're getting to know everybody, and but I think that the line of we're exclusive is defined by hopefully a conversation.
Yeah, I actually think it's probably a helpful thing to have a category definition that says we're interested, but we haven't moved into anything with commitment or exclusivity in that sense. Is probably a helpful thing because it lets you acknowledge that there's something potentially going on without the weirdness of, are they friends? Are they not friends? Is it more than friendship? I don't know. So it's probably an overall helpful thing. Where would you counsel someone to introduce physical affection and some forms of connection versus withholding that or waiting on that? How would you advise people on that front in terms of the dating scene?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. It's a common question. I think you have to take into account your some of your past history with that kind of thing. Past sexual history, and just kind of either people can carry a lot of shame, or I've had this past encounter and this other person maybe didn't, and I'm a little more hesitant. So I think there's definitely a need to be let's be exclusive with each other. I would counsel someone and say, make sure that this person is committed to you, you're committed to them, you're seeing marriage as an option, not saying you're seeing marriage as definitely happening, but you're saying this is a person that I could see myself one day being with forever. And so I would say, some people say, I'd like to wait till my wedding day to even have the first kiss. And I would say that isn't a bad thing. I would say that isn't, that's a harder thing, perhaps, but it's maybe more common than some people realize to do that. And yeah, the line of like, should we hold hands? Should we kiss? I think that needs to be discussed probably before you move into it, because I think once you move into that world, it's hard to kind of pull it back. Is what I've seen. And,
yeah. It would seem to me that there's more regret from doing too much too early rather than regret from waiting. And so I would generally say the longer you can get to know somebody without introducing that, the stronger the friendship bond gets, and the more, just the less potential for some heartache in the relationship is. But I do think there's probably a fine line too of that is part of a romance, is some of the physical side of it as well. And so waiting too long can also create a unnecessary questioning. So I think there is that's not the easiest thing to do. What would you say to somebody who feels like they have been maybe more physical than they've wanted to be in the past, and now they're trying to say, okay, I want to date and be a little less that way in this new season? How would you advise them to navigate that and to talk about it even with somebody they might be dating now?
I'd say proceed with caution, to know that about if that's something that's in your past and that you're saying, I'd like it to be different moving forward, to just know that, to bring that one before God and say, this is something that's real. This is something you need to, have in your prayer life is, out there. And then with the other person, again, it's an honesty, as much as you can and are willing to early on, to say, this is part of my past, and I'd like to, proceed with caution if we can.
Does it need to be divulged?
I think that maybe the details of it, no, I don't know, need to. I think I would counsel, couples all the time as they're, engaged and getting ready to be married. Maybe that's the place where you need to work towards full honesty and full transparency and saying, here's what I want to share. And but yeah, in dating, I don't know if all of it,
There was a wedding. This was years ago, before I came to Pittsburgh, and the night before I was involved in this, the guy decided that he needed to tell, the night before the wedding, he needed to come clean with everything that he had been a part of that he had not said before. And as you can imagine, that was not ideal timing. When it was like, oh my, and she did go through with the wedding. But it was like, oh my, that's probably not when I would choose to do that.
Right.
But yeah, I tend to think that you're, I would agree with your sentiment that you don't really need to hit every detail, because details aren't necessarily helpful. But I think there needs to be an awareness of the extent to which you've been there, because if there's any sense of hiding something, that is a barrier to intimacy as well. And those are hard conversations, but important conversations as well. Okay, how would you recommend that people pursue spirituality together?
Yeah, that's a good question too. That's a question that I think people are comfortable asking me more than the physical boundaries and things like that. So, as far as you're dating, things are getting serious. Should we read a book together? Should we even pray together? I've heard some people say, like, I don't know about that until you're married, and I think that your spiritual life and dating life and friendship life can be connected in a real important way. Now, if the person you're dating is the only source of spiritual, engagement that you're getting, that's only with them, then that's could be a problem. I think there has to be we're both on a journey, and now we're coming together, and we're sharing that with each other. I think that's healthy. The danger of it is when I've seen one person, it's an unyoke. They're running really fast. They're chasing after God and spiritual things, and the other person is like, yeah, I like that, sure, but it's not. Maybe they're playing the game a little bit to say, yeah, I'm with you.
Okay, so how have you seen that work out when couples have gone ahead and married after that kind of disparity of passion, for lack of a better word? Because it's not necessarily that it's not an authentic belief, but there's certainly maybe a lack of the same fervor.
It can be a challenge, and I've seen it work out sometimes where, one person has really kind of risen up and said like, okay, like, yeah, I want to chase after this with you, and but a lot of the times it gets into a situation where there's hey, wait, I thought I was marrying a person who was with me in this, and they wanted to be a part of this church, and now they maybe don't want to as much, or be as connected as me, and I feel like I'm doing, running the race hard, and they're not. So, yeah, I think there's a tendency in dating to say I want to be everything that this person wants me to be and thinks I should be, and I'll do anything to kind of do that. So to be understanding of that in dating, and maybe wary is not a good word because it sounds like the other person's trying to trick someone. I mean, I don't think that's necessarily the case all the time, but maybe it's more of they just want to be liked, and they just want to be, I want this person to see I care about them, so I'm going to take an interest in what they interest in. So I always caution people, is like, you're looking for someone who's also as excited about the things of God as you are, and not someone that you're having to kind of like pull along with you, or
Yeah, I can see it both ways. At times I've seen people, it's what they wanted, and until they met somebody, it wasn't front and center, but when they did, they almost felt like, yes, that is how and who I want to be. Yeah. But I've also seen people be like, yeah, sure, that's important to me, and then, a year after the wedding, I'm not interested in that. That's your thing. Yeah. And if faith is your most important component of your life, that would be heartbreaking, especially when and if you introduce kids to the equation. Yeah. And I would be of the opinion that the verse in 2 Corinthians that says, don't be unequally yoked, certainly applies to believer, unbeliever. But I think there's even a nuance to that in terms of passion, interest, some of that. Like I think there's, it's possible to be unequally yoked, even if both in name are believers. Yeah. And so there's some wisdom to saying, let's try to understand that. At the same time, none of us are finished products, and we all grow over time. Sure. To be where we are. So you have some boys who are not in their 20s yet, but are
not yet.
Probably starting to notice and pay attention to this whole arena. What would be your hope for your boys as they enter their 20s in terms of dating, marriage? Like what would you want them to get?
Yeah. I think what my wife and I both are trying to shape, especially my oldest right now, is that girls, a dating relationship, it can be a really positive thing at the right age, at the right time, for the right reasons. Understanding God's design for women, for men, for that every person, regardless of if you're viewing a person as a potential, girlfriend, is beloved and cherished by God, and so to treat people in that way, to treat all women as beloved and cherished and God's daughter, and that's the world they live in is so opposite in that way. It's you see an attractive woman or an attractive girl, and you try to get with that girl or try to. There's very little talk of, well, how do I treat people well? How do I care for other people well? It's do what satisfies and pleases you is the world, telling them. And so as we try to instill, biblical, what God says about their life, that's my hope, is that they see women as not objects to be won, or it's people to be cared for and cherished as God would cherish them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the vision of marriage and family is helpful for the emerging generation, which sometimes is hard to have because there haven't been maybe as many role models.
Yeah.
But to say, oh, that is what I want, because otherwise there's not a lot of reason not to embrace hookup culture and some of those things, other than just you shouldn't, because the Bible says marriage should be undefiled, a marriage bed, or that's God's design. But it's the vision of oh no, there is something beautiful about a couple that has saved as much of themselves as possible for one another, loves one another, embraces life together, and then if God wills, has children and brings them into that whole family union. And that is a vision thing that is that is very different than just simply saying, hey, this is one option among that. What do you think is the greatest danger for somebody in this phase of life, if you had to articulate that?
Yeah. I think perhaps the pressure to get it right, and to not, is this the one? To know immediately. I see people wanting to know and understand. After the first date, I've heard people say, I'm not sure if she or he is the one. It's like, well, it's pretty hard to tell after just getting to know them for a couple weeks. So you might have to give it, if there's any potential there, if there wasn't any red flags or run the other way, you might want to give it a couple more. So it's the patience, it's and to not succumb to the pressure of, you have to know.
Okay, so here's a question off of that. How much is there is a one mentality correct versus incorrect?
Yeah. The one, and if you miss the one, you'll never. Yeah, no, I don't buy into that probably as much as the Hollywood screenwriters would say, but I think there is an element of God has a person for everybody, and to trust that, now you can say, well, what if the person's in Japan and I'm here in the United States, how am I supposed to find this person? But there's an element of trusting God has you in a place for a reason, God has other people in a place for a reason, and to bring people together. So,
all right, this is good. We're 29 minutes in and have our first real disagreement. All right, which is good. That makes podcasts better.
Come on. It took us 29 minutes to get there.
Basically, where we weren't basically saying, I kind of agree. So I would probably be more of the view that God really doesn't have a single person. I mean, God's sovereign, so in that sense, sure. But I tend to believe that most people could have married several other people and had just as good a marriages, because it's a lot more about the effort that you put in, the way that you love people, than it is just like you found your soulmate.
Yeah.
And I sometimes think that the soulmate language and all of that is damaging to putting in the work, because you kind of get this fatalistic, the one, not the one. Yeah. Oh, I married them. Oh, they're not the one.
Right.
And I made a mistake. Well, if you would work at it, maybe it would be okay.
Yeah.
And I think most people could probably have married several people and had it work out really well. Obviously, it could have worked out poorly as well. But I think it's a lot more about, once you make that commitment, saying, what is it that I'm bringing to that every day than it
Yeah.
is finding that
No,
person.
I agree with that. I think there
Took away my disagreement.
Yeah, come on. Well, I agree with that to the point of the work that's put into a marriage is more important than this person and I aren't compatible. As I counsel couples in pre-marriage counseling, it's less of a compatibility, are we right for each other, and more of a here's what to expect as you become one, as you become married. Like here are the caution flags, here's where your personalities could butt up against each other, and to be mindful of that. So no, and I think, not trying to backtrack off my original thing, but to say that someone has the one, I think there's people out there that are, set and destined to meet, and God is ordaining something behind the scenes that we're not aware of. Now, and maybe that was my argument there's a person in Japan I don't even know about. There could be a person in Japan that would be great for you to marry, but you're probably not going to meet him.
Right.
So,
and I think, again, once you make the decision, then the person is your one.
Yeah.
And that's really the idea of Christian marriage, is that you're saying, okay, whatever comes down the pike, once we have married, this is a lifelong commitment. And other than a couple exceptions in the New Testament, we will stay together and work at it with everything. And that's, I would say, the yearning even in our culture is still for that. Because, my argument is always, it's the love songs, any genre of music, almost any genre. Once in a while you'll get hookup songs. But the songs that people like a lot of times are, you're my person, this is for life, I'm committed to you. And the reason we long for that is there's something divine that represents, and it's a taste of heaven when you feel that kind of commitment and acceptance from somebody in this life. And so there is something in us that longs for it and then says, yes, now that we've made this decision, you will be the person. But I think when we put pressure on that ahead of time, saying, I've got to find them, then sometimes we almost approach dating like finding the perfect, car to buy or the perfect house, where it's, well, this one doesn't have those features and this one should have that. And instead of, this is a different kind of a decision. Yeah. What role does prayer play for you in your mind in this?
In finding the right...
Dating, finding,
Yeah, I think there's, again, if it's something that is, you find, and I'll tell anyone this, dominating your prayer life, it's the only thing that you can, pray about or think about, then it's probably consuming too much of you. But it should certainly be something that if you're serious about following Jesus and the ways of, stepping in the faith, then it's certainly something you can ask others to pray for you about and say, hey, my heart's a little too consumed or thinking about this, or pray that God might bring a person into my life that I could share life with is a great thing and a good thing. I think the importance of prayer and in any part of your life, especially if it's something that's important to you, can't be understated enough. Would be what I would tell people. But to let it consume and let it be the only thing that you're waking up thinking about, then it's probably turning into an idol, turning into something that's a little too much of your spiritual time and life. And
My tendency generally in prayer, and I would guess that people will go either the opposite way of this or toward this, and that is, I often don't ask God directly enough for things that are really on my heart, because it feels like, well, God knows, and I don't want to presume, and I don't want it to be a selfish prayer. And so a lot of times I won't pray for the things that matter most to me, which I'm not sure is a good approach. And I think people can do certainly what you said, where it's dominating and God, please, please. But I think a lot of times people might pray about a lot of other things and then not pray about something just because it's so close to their heart, and maybe they don't want, maybe I don't want sometimes the answers that it seems like God's giving. But to say, no, I am going to just bring the pleading of my heart and being honest with God about what's there is probably a really healthy spiritual discipline in the midst of dating as well. So, good. Any other last words of wisdom for somebody in the phase of thinking about, considering?
Yeah. I would say consider not just your own desires, but the other person even more than what you're, is this, it's always is this person right for me? How's this going to affect what's going on here? But even consider, the more you can consider what's going on the other side, not rushing to, assume something, assuming the best about the other person before you can say, well, I heard this about this person, or, their friend told me this. Always going to the person and having a conversation in honesty and dating, I think, is the best way forward. If there is anything you're unsure about, or I wonder about this person, ask. And if the person maybe is unwilling to share, maybe they're not at the point spiritually or maturity-wise that you need them to be at, or it might not be right in the right time. And to let God, in His time, work out. It might not be right in a season, but 6 months, a year, 2 years, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah,
certainly you don't want to be too quick to jump to a conclusion.
It's an important decision. Yeah.
And even eliminating somebody, at the same time, you don't want to talk yourself into something. If you have doubts, especially people, if you listen long enough, will tell you who they are, what they value. And sometimes our tendency is not to believe what they've told us because we don't want to believe it. We want to have our version of them.
Yeah.
But probably in dating, is it nowhere more important than to say, what have they told me? Not what have other people said, but what do I sense? What have they told me? And if you're trying to talk yourself into moving forward with something, that's probably a bad idea. But at the same time, being open to saying, maybe my first impression wasn't necessarily right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, good. Well, thank you, Dan. Thanks for
that was
the
fun.
conversation. Thanks for spending part of your day here with us on Perspectives. As always, there's a lot of great content at Orchard Hill Church.com and Orchard Hill Plus that you can find. Different Perspectives podcast, Good Book podcast, the 5 Good Minutes classes, different things like that. Thanks for being here. Have a great day.